Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about Black Utopias in America.
Oh, very cool.
We'll be looking at some really fascinating stories and historical movements, and we're going to be using Aaron Robertson's book, The Black Utopians, as our guide.
Yeah, The Black Utopians is, it's really interesting because Robertson doesn't just observe these movements from the outside,
Right.
He actually weaves in his own family's history, which makes it super personal and gives you a really unique perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And his father's desire to go back to Promised Land, Tennessee, where his family is from, is kind of like the starting point for the whole book.
I see.
And Promised Land is really interesting because it was founded by formerly enslaved people.
Wow.
So it becomes this focal point for understanding how these individual desires for a better life connect with these larger societal dreams.
So individual choices reflecting these larger movements.
Exactly. And it makes you think about, how different people within a family, some embracing the future and others holding on to the past, how that reflects the complexities of these movements.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So Promised Land itself sounds kind of idyllic, like a fairy tale setting,
Yeah.
This perfect Black utopia.
Uh-huh.
But Robertson digs deeper and finds that the reality is a bit more complicated.
Okay, so what's the reality of Promised Land then?
Well, on the surface, Promised Land represents that yearning for a better world, that future free from the shackles of history. It's a physical manifestation of that dream.
Okay, get that.
But Robertson contrasts this image from his childhood with a more complex reality.
Oh, really? So what did he find out?
He uncovered Promised Land's connection to the iron industry and how it relied on the labor of enslaved people.
Huh. So the very system they were trying to escape.
Yeah, and it makes you question, was it really a utopia if it relied on the same oppressive systems?
It's that tension between ideal and reality.
Right, and we see this tension throughout various Black utopian movements.
It makes you think.
And amidst this complicated history, there's the story of Theo Edmondson, a carpenter who helped build Promised Land.
Oh.
And his story is so fascinating because he represents this hope in the midst of all this complexity.
Okay.
He was a musician, and through his music, he envisioned a brighter future for the community.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, his songs weren't just entertainment. They were like a form of resistance, a way to imagine and strive for something better.
So it's like his music maybe even influenced the utopian ideals that took root in Promised Land later on.
Yeah, it's possible music often plays a powerful role in social movements.
It's true.
And Edmondson's songs probably contributed to that collective hope for a better future.
For sure.
So we've got this fascinating backdrop of Promised Land, but Black utopian movements weren't limited to rural communities.
Right.
Robertson introduces us to two key figures who were active in Detroit, Albert Cleage Jr. and Glanton Dowdell.
Okay, what about them?
Well, their paths show how diverse these movements actually were. Cleage was a leader in the Black Christian nationalist movement.
Mm-hmm.
He believed in using the power of the Black church to create social change.
Interesting.
He saw it as a way to empower Black people politically and economically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dowdell had a totally different approach.
Really? How so?
He was an artist and activist, and he focused on community organizing,
Okay.
working directly with people affected by things like drug addiction.
So it's like a top-down versus bottom-up approach to achieving utopia.
Exactly. And it raises the question of how do we achieve utopia?
Right.
Is it through institutions or through grassroots action or maybe both? And both men were active in Detroit during the 1960s,
Okay.
which was a pretty intense time.
The 60s were a crazy time for everybody, but especially in Detroit, I bet.
Yeah. I mean, you had the rise of the Black Power movement and then the devastating rebellion in 67.
Right. A time of upheaval, but also possibility.
Exactly. It was a period where people were questioning everything and looking for new ways to build a better future.
So out of all this emerged Cleage's church, the Shrine of the Black Madonna.
Yeah. And the shrine wasn't just a place of worship.
Oh, really? What else was it then?
It became this multifaceted institution with all these initiatives aimed at Black self-sufficiency and empowerment.
Wow, so what kind of initiatives?
Well, they had economic cooperatives like the Black Star Supermarket,
Okay.
which was meant to keep money within the Black community.
That makes sense.
They also had a freedom school that taught African history and Black literature.
So reclaiming their own narrative.
Exactly. And they even had a communal living project called the NTC.
Wow. They created a whole ecosystem.
It was like a microcosm of their utopian vision right within the city.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But like any movement, they faced challenges.
Of course. What kind of challenges?
Cleage's movement had internal conflicts, economic struggles, even government surveillance.
Oh, wow.
And Dowdell's activism was risky, and he ended up going into exile in Sweden to avoid prosecution.
So the road to utopia is rarely smooth.
No, it's not. And Robertson shows us that throughout the book.
Right.
He explores not only the big ideas, but also the personal struggles and triumphs of the people involved.
And that's where his own story and his relationship with his father comes into play, right?
Exactly. It intertwines with the larger narrative of the shrine.
Okay, so how does his personal story connect with the shrine, especially given his complicated relationship with his father and faith?
Well, Robertson talks about feeling like an abnormal child in an imperfect family.
Oh, wow.
And he struggled to connect with his parents in Detroit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But then he had these really vivid summers in Promised Land, which was totally different from his life in Detroit.
Sounds like he found some peace there.
Yeah, he talks about how restorative those visits were and the sense of belonging he felt with his extended family.
It was a complete escape from Detroit.
It was a stark contrast, for sure. But what's interesting is that he also found solace in the church in Promised Land.
Huh, that's interesting because you said he had a complicated relationship with religion in Detroit.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, what role did spirituality play in shaping his understanding of utopia, both personally and within these movements?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's like Promised Land offered him a spiritual grounding that was missing in his everyday life.
Right, and that yearning for connection, for belonging, is a recurring theme in Robertson's book.
Definitely, it's a universal human desire, but it's even more powerful in the context of Black utopian movements.
Because they were trying to create spaces where Black people could feel truly seen and valued.
Exactly. So how does this yearning for connection lead Robertson to the shrine?
Well, it's kind of through his father's story. Remember, his father Dorian was incarcerated?
Oh, yeah.
And while he was in prison, he became really involved with the shrine's teachings.
Right. He found something there that gave him hope and purpose.
Exactly. And that connection became so strong that he urged his son to visit the shrine and explore those ideas for himself.
So it's like this generational passing of the torch.
Yeah, a really powerful image.
Yeah.
The father in prison guiding his son towards a spiritual home.
And it speaks to the legacy of these movements, how they can connect generations through shared ideals.
So did Robertson actually visit the shrine?
He did, and it had a profound impact on him.
Even though he was agnostic at the time.
Yeah, he describes being overwhelmed by the energy of the service and the collective hope he witnessed.
That's powerful.
He was drawn to the authenticity of their experience, their genuine belief in something bigger than themselves.
It's the kind of thing that transcends intellectual debate, you know?
Totally. It taps into something deeper, something emotional and spiritual.
But he must have felt conflicted too, right?
Oh, absolutely. His own skepticism clashed with this powerful collective energy, right?
Right, so how did he reconcile those feelings?
Well, he wrestled with his doubts about religion, but at the same time, he realized that his father, though physically absent, was spiritually present in that space.
Wow, that's heavy.
It was like their roles were reversed, the incarcerated father guiding the son toward a spiritual home.
That's an amazing image.
And this experience challenged him to rethink his relationship with faith, family, and community.
Okay, so what was it about the shrine besides the emotional experience that resonated with Robertson?
He saw their commitment to self-reliance and community building.
Okay.
They weren't just talking about a better world, they were actively creating it.
Right. With those initiatives we talked about before.
Exactly. The Black Star Supermarket, the Freedom School, the Cultural Center, the Communal Living Project.
They're putting their beliefs into action.
Yeah, and this spirit of self-determination really inspired Robertson.
Makes sense.
It made him question his own role in shaping a better future.
It's one thing to admire a movement. It's another to ask yourself, how am I contributing?
Exactly, and that's the question Robertson grapples with throughout the book.
It's about understanding not just the big picture, but the individual journeys, the personal struggles that bring those visions to life.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how Robertson navigates those personal struggles, particularly within the context of the Shrine's educational philosophy and their children's community project.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to hear more.
We'll be right back.
Okay. So, one thing that really stood out about the Shrine was how much emphasis they put on education.
Oh, yeah, they were super focused on that.
It wasn't just about changing things in the present,
Right.
They wanted to prepare future generations to build a better world.
Now that you mention it, I do remember Robertson talking about their Freedom School.
Oh, yeah?
Can you tell us a bit more about what their educational philosophy was like?
Well, the Freedom School was really interesting. They taught African history and Black revolutions.
Wow.
And Black literature. And it wasn't just about, like, filling kids' heads with facts, you know?
Right.
It was about fostering this sense of Black consciousness and pride in their culture, which is something that was often missing from mainstream education.
Yeah, it sounds like they were creating this counter-narrative.
Exactly.
Where Black children could see themselves reflected in what they were learning.
Right.
And understand their own history and heritage.
Yeah, and I think it was definitely a direct response to the limitations of the traditional education system.
Oh, for sure.
They saw that system as perpetuating this Eurocentric perspective that basically ignored or erased Black experiences.
Right.
So the Freedom School was a way to reclaim that narrative and empower Black children.
So true education should be liberating, not limiting.
Exactly.
And this commitment to shaping young minds went beyond the Freedom School, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Robertson also mentioned something called the Children's Community.
Ah, yes, the Children's Community. That was a really ambitious project. It's a communal living project.
Wow.
Kind of modeled after the Israeli kibbutz system.
Okay.
Where children were raised collectively and they shared responsibilities and developed a strong sense of community from a really young age.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea.
It was.
I mean, I can see the potential benefits, like the strong bonds and shared purpose it could create. But I imagine there were also challenges and maybe even some criticism.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Right. I mean, some people saw it as too authoritarian,
right.
Taking kids away from their families and imposing this really strict structure.
Yeah.
And others questioned whether it could really work long term.
Those are valid concerns for sure.
But for the Shrine, it was about creating this protected space where Black children could thrive, free from the racism and oppression of the outside world.
Right. It was about creating a better world for them.
Yeah. And they believed that this communal upbringing would instill these values of unity and cooperation and collective responsibility that would carry on into adulthood.
So it sounds like they were walking this tightrope.
They were.
Trying to balance their utopian vision with the realities of societal norms.
Right.
Did Robertson offer any personal reflections on this? Like, did he ever actually visit the children's community himself?
He did, yeah. He described visiting the children's community and being really struck by the sense of order and purpose there.
Interesting.
He was especially impressed by the kids' discipline.
Wow.
And how committed they were to their shared responsibilities.
So he saw it as an example of how a different way of life was possible.
Exactly, like a more communal and cooperative way of living.
But he also acknowledged the potential downsides, right?
Of course.
Like the risk of isolating the children and limiting their choices.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue.
It is. There are no easy answers.
And that's what I think makes Robertson's exploration so fascinating,
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the complexities and contradictions.
No, right.
He shows us both the inspiring aspirations and the practical challenges.
It makes you really think about the nuances and trade-offs of pursuing any utopian vision.
For sure.
It seems like there's this constant tension between the ideals of utopia and the realities of human nature and societal structures.
There is.
Did Robertson come to any conclusions about how to navigate that tension?
That's a great question. I don't think it's about finding a perfect solution.
Yeah.
It's more about constantly questioning and adapting and refining our approaches.
Right. Always striving to do better.
Exactly. And Robertson highlights how the Shrine itself evolved over time.
Oh, yeah.
Shifting from Black Christian nationalism to a more practical, community-centered approach.
And that's where KUA comes in, right?
Yes, exactly.
Can you remind us what KUA stands for and how it represents this evolution within the Shrine?
Sure. So KUA stands for Kutoa, Ujima, and Ujamaa.
Okay.
And each of these terms represents a key principle.
I see.
So Kutoa is about offering yourself in service to the Black nation. Like focusing on individual commitment to the collective good.
Got it.
Ujima stresses collective work and responsibility, recognizing that we can achieve more together than we can alone. And Ujamaa focuses on cooperative economics, like building a self-sufficient Black economy that empowers the community.
So it's like a three-pronged approach to empowerment. Well,
Exactly. Personal dedication, collective action, and economic independence.
I like that.
It's about recognizing that to create lasting change, you need a multifaceted approach.
Right.
one that addresses the social, political, and economic realities that Black people face.
So it's not just about changing hearts and minds.
No, it's about changing the systems that perpetuate inequality.
Exactly.
And this evolution continued even after Jaramogi Abebe Agyeman passed away.
Oh, yeah. He was formerly known as Albert Cleage Jr., right?
That's right. His successor, Bishop Andrew Seegars, also known as Kimathi.
Okay.
He further refined their philosophy with the introduction of best self theology.
And what's that about?
Best self theology emphasizes personal growth and development as a path to collective liberation.
So from Black Christian nationalism to KUA to best self-theology, it's amazing to see this trajectory of adaptation and refinement within the movement.
It's really fascinating, right?
They weren't afraid to evolve and meet the needs of the community.
Exactly, and to adapt to the challenges of the time.
It shows that it's not about clinging to rigid dogma.
No, it's about constantly evolving and growing.
So it's like a river,
yeah.
constantly flowing, changing course, but always moving towards that same destination.
A future where Black people can thrive free from oppression.
And empowered to create their own destiny.
Right, and it's not just about the shrine.
Right.
Robertson connects this legacy to contemporary movements as well.
Oh, for sure, like those Black eco-villages he mentioned.
Yes, exactly.
They're carrying the torch of Black utopia, experimenting with new ways of living and working together, often in harmony with nature.
They're taking those lessons from earlier movements and applying them in new and innovative ways.
It's so inspiring, but I am curious about what unique challenges and opportunities these modern-day Black utopian communities are facing.
That's a really good question. And I think that's where Robertson's insights become even more relevant.
How so?
Well, he doesn't just present these movements as historical artifacts. He connects them to our present-day struggles and aspirations.
Yeah.
He forces us to ask how we can apply those principles of self-determination, collective responsibility, and community building to the challenges we face today.
It's like a call to action.
It is.
To think beyond our own individual needs and envision a future where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, to consider how we can contribute to building that future, no matter how small our efforts may seem.
That's a really powerful message.
It is, and I think that brings us to the core question that Robertson leaves us with.
What's that?
What does all of this mean for you?
Yeah.
What resonates with your understanding of utopia?
Right.
How can we as individuals and as a society weave our own threads into that tapestry of Black utopia?
That is such a powerful question. It's not just about admiring these movements from afar.
Right.
It's about finding our own place in them and contributing our own skills and perspectives to that ongoing struggle for a better world.
And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Oh, perfect.
We'll look at some of the key takeaways from Robertson's work and how they can inspire us to action, to become active participants in building a future where Black utopia isn't just a dream, but a lived reality.
Wow. We've really gone deep into this idea of Black utopias.
We have, haven't we?
From Promised Land to those movements in Detroit, it's obvious that this isn't just some theoretical concept.
Yeah, it's about real people.
Yeah.
Real struggles.
And that persistent hope for a better future.
You know what I really appreciate about Robertson's book? Is that he doesn't try to sugarcoat things.
Right.
He acknowledges all the complexities and contradictions within these movements.
He doesn't give us easy answers or pretend like it was all smooth sailing.
Exactly. He grapples with the tough stuff. Challenges, the setbacks, the conflicts.
Like all those external pressures.
Like all the things that made these utopian endeavors so difficult.
And that honesty makes his insights even more valuable, I think.
Oh, for sure.
It'd be easy to just focus on the successes and ignore the messy parts.
Right. But he doesn't do that.
He digs deep and shows us the human flaws, the mistakes, and those outside forces that often got in the way.
And by doing that, he helps us understand that creating a utopia isn't about reaching some perfect endpoint.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process.
Right. It's a constant struggle.
Yeah, for liberation and self-determination.
And it's about adapting to new situations, learning from our mistakes, and never giving up on that dream of a better world.
Exactly.
It's like what you were saying about the shrine and how they evolved over time. They went from Black Christian nationalism to KUA and then to best self-theology.
They were constantly trying to find the best way to reach their goals.
Right. They weren't afraid to question themselves or try new things.
Yeah, and they were willing to change their strategies based on what they were up against.
And that willingness to adapt, to learn, and to grow, that's essential for any movement that wants to make real change.
I completely agree.
So it's not about sticking to some rigid set of rules.
No.
Or expecting there to be one perfect blueprint for utopia.
It's about being flexible and responsive, and always being willing to look at ourselves critically.
What are some of the biggest takeaways from Robertson's book that really capture this approach?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important takeaways is the focus on self-reliance and empowering communities.
Okay.
Over and over again, we see these Black utopian movements building their own institutions, their own economies, their own support systems.
They knew that true freedom wouldn't come from waiting for others to give it to them.
Right. They had to create it for themselves.
Yeah. Taking control of their own destiny.
And recognizing the power of working together.
Pooling their resources and skill.
We build something bigger than themselves.
That's such a powerful idea.
And it's just as relevant today as it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, we see it in movements like Black Lives Matter and in all those Black-owned businesses and cooperatives that are popping up.
Yeah, it's about creating opportunities and building wealth within the community.
It's so inspiring to see that legacy of self-determination alive and well. But self-reliance isn't the only important lesson, right?
No, you're right.
Robertson also talks about how crucial education and cultural affirmation are.
Education was fundamental to so many of these movements.
They knew that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And that teaching future generations about their history and culture was key to making lasting change.
They built their own schools and created their own curriculums.
They wanted to tell their own stories.
Right, to counter those biased perspectives that were so common in mainstream education.
And that focus on cultural affirmation is so important.
It is. It's about celebrating the beauty and strength of Black culture.
Challenging those negative stereotypes.
Yeah, reclaiming your narrative and defining your own identity.
And having that sense of cultural pride that's essential for building strong communities.
And have shared sense of purpose.
So it goes beyond just material resources and political influence.
Right. It's about nurturing the next generation.
Instilling in them a sense of self-worth and the belief that they can make a difference.
And I think that's what Robertson's book really challenges us to think about.
How can we create a world where Black children can truly thrive?
How can we help them reach their full potential?
That's a huge question.
It goes beyond any one movement or institution.
It requires us to change our values as a society.
To recognize the worth of every human being.
No matter their race or background.
And we have to actively break down those systems that create barriers and inequality.
It's not enough to just talk about the problem.
No, we have to be part of the solution.
We have to work towards a world where justice and equality are a reality for everyone.
That's a powerful message.
It is. It reminds us that Black utopia isn't some far-off dream.
It's a call to action.
It's a challenge to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to live a good life.
And it's a journey we all need to be on.
We hope you'll check out Aaron Robertson's The Black Utopians.
Yeah, dive into those incredible stories and let them inspire you.
Find your own place in this struggle for a better world, because in the tapestry of Black utopia, there's always room for another thread.
So well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.